Hi, welcome to my series on Tinnitus and Hyperacusis toolboxes. My name's Jan, and I've had hyperacusis since I was about 6 years old and tinnitus since I was about 22 in 1986. So over 40 to 50 years now, and I'm also a retired audiologist. And I focused on tinnitus, hyperacusis, and noise-induced hearing health damage. So what I wanted to start with today is separating some fact from misinformation about tinnitus and hyperacusis, because there is a lot of misinformation out there, and I thought I'd do a little debunking. So sometimes when people find out that I have tinnitus or hyperacusis, I get some comments that can be challenging to deal with, because I do agree with Bernard Williams, who said, "Unsolicited advice is the junk mail of life." So these are some of those comments and the types of responses that I will try to use. So they might range from, "It's imaginary," maybe you should, "Okay, well, nobody ever asks first what I've already tried or what I'm already doing. They just start in with the unsolicited advice," that drives me nuts. Other ones, "Oh, but you look fine, at least it's not fatal," that type of thing. So here's a big one. Are tinnitus and hyperacusis imaginary? Now, there's a difference here between people who've never heard of them, which I find a little hard to believe in today's day and age, but anyways, of course it's possible, versus "You're bonkers, you're crazy, there's something wrong in your head." So the thing that I ask people here is, okay, there's been international scientists and researchers doing studies on tinnitus and hyperacusis for many, many decades. There's doctors, ENTs, audiologists, psychologists, all different types of hearing health specialists who are all doing evaluations and discussing management options for tinnitus and hyperacusis. No one's going to do that for something imaginary. Why would professionals waste their time? It makes no sense. So I guess it would have been helpful to do the definitions earlier, but let's jump into them now. Okay, so tinnitus is basically hearing too much sound. So it's basically you're hearing an extra sound or mix of sounds when there's no outside sound source. So for example, I have like at least 3 different sounds for my tinnitus. I have like a shh, and like a whistling sound and a screeching sound and a few all mixed together. That's normal, that's the way it is. When you have tinnitus that never goes away, some people it's a bit more intermittent, but when it's constant, it can be like fingernails on a blackboard or a never-ending car alarm. It can be very intrusive. And when they've done studies for prevalence, and this is kind of worldwide, all ages, including children and teens, and across genders, they find that about 30% of people have tinnitus in the general population. Out of those people, about 40 to 55% also have hyperacusis. So I often like to think of it like, chronic pain and chronic fatigue are kind of 2 sides of the same coin. And to my mind, tinnitus and hyperacusis are also 2 sides of the same coin because there's just so many similarities. So for hyperacusis, now you're hearing sound too much. There's different categories. I have all of them. So basically, sound hurts. It would be, we can't really do a simulation of hyperacusis, but like if you bashed your elbow, that's how it feels when sound bashes through your ears and brain. It's like the volume of the world is stuck on high. And some people can have a fear or panic reaction. So if I'm out and about and I see someone with an air horn, I have a panic attack and I have to get away as fast as I can. Even if I have my hearing protection, I'm gone. And so that often goes with a loudness or pain hyperacusis, obviously, because, it's natural to be a bit fearful of a sound if you know it's going to hurt. And then misophonia, or intense sound dislike, is another category of hyperacusis, but that tends to be more like a really severe annoyance or anger reaction when other people make even quiet trigger sounds. So gum chewers, if people are tapping on a device, and if I'm just sitting there and someone's next to me tapping, it like drives me nuts. Metal on metal, I hate it. So things like that. And again, if we're looking at the stats for prevalence, about 17% of people have hyperacusis in the general population, and out of those people, about 90% also have tinnitus. So again, two sides of the same coin, I think. Now, as far as coping, people can range from, they don't notice stress, they don't think about it, it doesn't affect their daily life. And that can also range up to like extreme distress, where it's affecting your quality of life at home, play, work, every aspect of daily living. And so when people make these I shouldn't say that, should I? Okay, I'm going to say it. When people make these dumb or uninformed comments, that's not supportive. And people who are trying to cope better need support networks. Okay, this is one of my favorite ones. Isn't it just subjective? So, tinnitus and hyperacusis must not be real because there are no objective tests for it. Well, that's not true. But people who think this, you often get the vibe that they're thinking, I'm too sensitive, or it's all in my head. I've seen reports where doctors have put, this anxious person. And it's really hard to feel validated when you're getting that type of response. So just because it's invisible doesn't mean it's not really there. There's been years of objective brain imaging, and it proves that there is hyperactive or overactive areas in the brain for both hyperacusis and tinnitus. So what does that mean in the real world? Okay, let's look at how we hear. So we've got the outside sound, it comes through our ears, goes past the synapses and hearing nerves, and then gets up to our brain. And that's where we have auditory networks that are all like really linked in together. So you've got links to attention, memory, cognition, or thinking, and also with emotions, right? Some sounds make us happy, some sounds make us unhappy. So there's a lot going on in our brain with incoming sound. And so when the brain activity starts up for that outside sound, then we hear a sound message. For hyperacusis, there's an outside sound, but once it reaches the brain, there's that hyperactivity. So the brain has literally amped up the volume in the auditory networks, and so a more intense sound message is generated, and people hear an extra loud sound. So for example, if someone with normal or typical hearing started to find sound uncomfortable or too loud at around 90 dB. Compare that to, say, if somebody had hyperacusis and sound was too loud at 70 dB, but they're hearing a 70 dB sound as if it's 90 dB because their brain bumped it up. They've also done studies showing that pain networks in the brain are triggered in people who have hyperacusis. So they can objectively find that evidence of why we're getting the hyperacusis and that pain response. Now, when it comes to tinnitus, there's no outside sound. We have that brain hyperactivity, and the brain generates a message that, there must be a sound going on because these networks are going. And so we hear it as a sound, but it's starting in our brain. It's not actually starting in the outside world. And this makes sense if you stop to think that, say, for people who are in the deaf community, sometimes they can hear tinnitus because it's not starting in their inner ears or in their peripheral hearing system. It's actually been generated in their brain. So let's get back to some more of these questions. So here is the one that I really hate the most. When people are like, I have that too. I heard a noise in my head once, or every now and then, or, once a sound was too loud for me. Okay, I have to just take a pause. Don't punch them in the nose. Don't punch them in the nose. Don't punch them in the nose. Gently explain that everybody hears sounds every now and then. even people with tinnitus get extra sounds every now and then over and above our regular everyday tinnitus. So, that's just kind of normal hearing that would not fall under a definition of chronic tinnitus or chronic hyperacusis. This is another tough one. But you look fine. Translation, I think they still think that tinnitus and hyperacusis are imaginary. I used to also get this a lot because I have fibromyalgia, which is a type of arthritis, and also chronic fatigue. And so I've always gotten this a lot. Oh, you look so fine. You must be doing fine. Well, if we let ourselves fall apart and show how we're really feeling, then people don't want to be around us. And if we put on a brave face, then people don't realize how much goes into, planning and pacing and coping strategies in daily life. Oh yeah, this is a great one. Maybe you need a job or a hobby. Translation, are you lazy? Maybe you're just lazy. Look, we don't need busy work. If busy work made tinnitus and hyperacusis coping better, we'd all be as busy as bees. And I've met people and also had seen people at my clinic when I was working that they were exhausted because they tried to stay so busy to try to, ignore their tinnitus or hyperacusis. It's not a valid coping strategy. Now, obviously, I have hobbies. I do things to help distract me, to help relax me. I love gardening, I love needlework, reading, different things. But they have to be ones that fit into my coping strategies and not just be busy work. This is also a good one. Maybe you should exercise more. I think this is, if we translate this, it's just another way to say you're lazy. So look, if more exercise was the answer, then nobody would have trouble with tinnitus and hyperacusis. And another aspect of this is that when people have chronic conditions like tinnitus and hyperacusis, we need to take things more slowly and gently with our bodies. So if you are going to exercise, I've seen studies that really suggest that it should be gentle stretching, gentle motions, going for just gentle walks. You shouldn't be out there trying to run a marathon or doing something super energetic unless that's what you would normally be doing, because exercise itself is not the answer. Yeah, this is a good one. Maybe if you got more sleep, you'd feel better. Yeah, wouldn't everybody? This is another one where it's important to go back to the science. So they've done a lot of studies, and what they've found is people with tinnitus and probably hyperacusis too, when we're sleeping, we don't reach that really deep, restful stage of sleep. So maybe you've slept for 6 hours or 8 hours, but you still feel unrested when you wake up because it is like a chronic insomnia. And a lot of people with tinnitus especially have trouble falling asleep. And again, there's coping tools that you can do to help with that. But yeah, more sleep doesn't necessarily mean restful sleep. And it can be helpful, especially for your closer circle of family or friends, so that they know that even if you sleep, you might still be more tired than the average kitten. Okay, this can be a hard one. At least it's not fatal. Sometimes this doesn't seem to come from the best place. There's worse health conditions. Suck it up, buttercup. But other times it can come from a place of helpfulness where people are, trying to get you to think more positively. And while there are strategies and well-being approaches to help with that, telling people it's not fatal is not on the list. So even if it's well-intentioned, it's not really helpful. The thing here is, like chronic pain or chronic fatigue, Tinnitus and hyperacusis are something, when they're chronic, that you're having to deal with on a day-to-day basis. They can affect quality of life in different areas. There can be planning and pacing. Maybe you're always having to think about hearing protection every time you go out. It can be really tiring to always be having to deal with something. And the other aspect is, it's common to have flare-ups. So you can be going along and I can be coping fine, and then sometimes for no reason, I have a big flare-up. Well, that's normal. I know I can use more coping tools and get my flare-up to settle down, but still, I wouldn't wish tinnitus or hyperacusis on any friend. Maybe my worst enemy, but not a friend. And then some people are curious, isn't there a cure? And absolutely not yet. There are still many cure sales. There always have been, as long as I've been kind of in the tinnitus community and exploring options. Don't waste your money. Don't fall for quick fixes. A lot of them prey on people and use scare tactics. For example, there's some company selling a tinnitus pill, and they're saying that if you don't take their pill, the tinnitus will give you dementia. That is not true. So again, we want to focus on science supported. And again, some people don't know and tell us, too bad nothing can be done. But that's absolutely not true either. Something can certainly be done. I'm a good example of that. I kind of come from the dark days of when nothing could be done. There's lots of options now, and a lot of them are free, low-cost self-help. So again, when something can be done, please make sure it's safe and science-supported. Don't fall for some rando info that you find online or from some random person. Make sure it's someone information that has a good basis. A great choice is the American Tinnitus Association. They are a nonprofit. They are leaders in providing educational resources and funding science on tinnitus and hyperacusis. Tinnitus Today is their monthly or is the quarterly magazine, if you remember. And their website also has a sound library of different sound options for sound therapy. They have different examples of different apps all in one place for sound therapy, sleep, and relaxation. There's lots of other websites too, but that's just one example. On my website, I've also pulled together a bunch of resources kind of in one place with different websites and groups. I've got examples of my articles that are all there, free to read. I've done up some sample handouts and worksheets. For example, I have this worksheet on coping with tinnitus and hyperacusis. It's got a lot of information in there, but it also has examples of different things and some do's and don'ts. And that's under my science page with tools. And also I have an education page with kind of like my news updates. And so that's where you would find some tinnitus simulations and all these other things. If you want to follow how I'm doing with my toolbox, please feel free to join me on Instagram. That's kind of mainly where I share my coping tools and what I'm up to. So if this helps at least one person, then it's all worth it. Please feel free to like, subscribe, or check out my links in the description below. I'm planning more videos on building coping toolboxes and talking about personal listening risks, public health and noise, and doing some case studies. So I hope that'll be interesting to some people. If you're fed up of hearing about tinnitus and hyperacusis, feel free to check out my other channel where I have my messed up story time with some funny and scary stories, some actually inspired by my ears and others that are just kind of dark, wacky tales. Anyways, quiet cheers and stay safe.